regularly scheduled meeting of the Tinley Park Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm going to read a disclaimer from the governor's office before we start. This simply says, notice, meeting modifications due to COVID-19. Pursuant to Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07, Executive Order 2020-10, Executive Order 2020-18, Executive Order 2020-32, Executive Order 2020-33, and Executive Order 2020-39, which collectively suspends the Illinois Open Meetings Act requirements regarding the in-person attendance by members of a public body during the duration of the Gubernatorial Disaster Proclamation issued on May 29, 2020. The members of the Plan Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals Commission will be participating in the meeting through teleconference. A live stream of the electronic meeting will be broadcasted at the Village Hall pursuant to Governor's Executive Order number 2020-10 and CDC guidelines. No more than 10 people will be allowed in the council chambers at any one time. Anyone in excess of 10 will be asked to wait in another room with the feed to the meeting until the agenda items for which the person or persons would like to speak is being discussed, or until the open floor for public comments. Now, also, I need to remind anyone that we are on YouTube live at Tinley Park Television. So if you want to see the meeting or watch the proceedings there, you are invited to do so. Okay, now at this time, I'd like to call the regular scheduled meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, the Zoning Board Chairman, that's me. I'm Steve Sepisi. I'm the Chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm speaking. Before we get started, I would like to ask anyone that's joining us remotely to please be patient and respectful as we navigate the meeting remotely. I would appreciate if you each mute your phones. Thank you. For those wishing to follow along with the PowerPoint presentation, you are encouraged to access the meeting through the Tinley Park YouTube channel. It is my understanding that all members and staff present have checked in on the conference line so that we can begin our meeting. Please note, throughout the meeting, we expect to have another individual joining us with phone call pertaining to speaking agenda items. Okay. Again, thank you in advance for your patience and cooperation through the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, which is convening remote via conference call. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the Governor Pritzker's orders that we spoke about before. The Open Meeting Act, of course, has been suspended. And please note that this meeting is being recorded so that some attendees are participating remotely. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and open the meeting and start with the roll call, if we could, please?
Parashchuk?
Here.
Vargas? Bettenhausen?
Here.
Chairman Sepisi?
Present. Okay, thank you very much. Before turning to the first item on the agenda, allow me to cover the ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business, and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As a chairperson, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. As they conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of the members, inviting each by name to comment or ask questions. Further, please remember to mute your phone when you are not speaking. Please also start your comment with your name. That's very important. If the members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through me, taking care to first identify yourself and then make your request. Okay. Staff, are there any communications to the commission that we should be dealing with now?
No, there's not.
Okay. So the minutes. Let's start with the minutes of the July 23rd meeting. I believe you've all seen those. They're online. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting?
Commissioner Parashchuk, so moved.
Okay, and a second?
Commissioner Bettenhausen, second.
Okay.
Commissioner Bettenhausen, second.
All those in favor signify so please by saying aye.
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 Okay. The vote is unanimous, so the meeting minutes have been accepted. We're going to go to item 1, and this is a public hearing about a corner fence variation at 6342 Arcadia Drive. This evening, we have the public hearing requested by the petitioners, Michael Carr, a variation from Section 3 of the zoning code fence regulations at the property located at 6342 Arcadia Drive in the R4 Signal Family Subdivision zoning district. This variation would permit the petitioner to install a 6-foot high privacy fence to encroach 12 feet into the required secondary front yard. Okay. Family residential zoning district. Okay. I need a motion, please, to open the hearing,
Commissioner Bettenhausen, so moved.
and a second.
Commissioner Poschek, second.
Okay, are there any dissenting votes? Okay, not hearing any, the motion is passed, so we will begin the hearing. Now, let's see, before we start, I have two things in my hand, I'm gonna hold these up. These are the two notifications, public notifications of these hearings. These are designed to give anyone in the neighborhood who has a comment or a question time or the opportunity to call in and voice their opinions or ask their questions, and they've been taken care of. Okay. As we go along, first off, give me 1 second here, I've got my pages all screwed up somehow. Page 3. Thanks, Barb. You're a godsend. Okay. So the petitioner, are you on the line? This is for the one for Mr. Parr, I believe it is?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Would you state your name, sir, and address for the record?
6342 Arcadia Drive.
Okay. We're gonna start with the staff report, and they will outline everything regarding this, so we'll begin with Dan.
Good, thanks. Yeah, so this is 6342 Arcadia Drive. This is if this seems familiar, the house and the lot and everything, it's because it's very similar to the last request that was before you guys. It's only a block away from the request that was here last week, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit because they're obviously related, being so close to each other, but differ in some ways too. So this is again a lot on the northeast corner of Ridgeland and Arcadia Drive. This is a 9,890 square foot corner lot. It's in the Lancaster Heights subdivision, and so this subdivision, the corner lots do have some additional width and additional size, and that's because they function with kind of two front yards. So in our newer subdivisions like this one, they've built in kind of some additional width and size on those lots. So that way they have, while still meeting those kind of front yard setbacks, they do have kind of the same backyard space essentially as those interior lots have, usable backyard space that's there. At this site, there is an existing elevated deck with a patio underneath it that is in the rear of the property. As a background on this site, and what we went over last week is that there's a neighbor to the south of this on the other side of Arcadia Drive that received a variation for a 6-foot privacy fence in 2013, and that was 12 feet into the setback, so that's 13 feet from the property line, and then there's usually a foot between the property line and the sidewalk. So 12 feet into the setback, 13 feet from the property line is what was approved there. Traditionally, these variations for privacy fences have really been limited to the 10 feet that we allow for corner fences in general. But by right, we only allow a 5 6-foot high open design fence to go 10 feet out. Occasionally, there has been some history of allowing it, like I said, 10 feet for a privacy fence if you look at the safety, the visibility, and then the overall subdivision to kind of make sure it fits. So the line kind of historically has been that 10 feet, and during that hearing in 2013, it was specifically called out that they were allowing kind of the 2 extra feet due to some existing deck stairs that were there. They basically, to put a fence at 10 feet, would have had to rebuild those deck stairs as well as a fairly large tree that they would have had to go quite a few feet inside of, or they would have had to cut down to make that 10 feet work. So that's where the 2 extra feet on that one came from. And then most recently, on the right side of the photo on this is 6342 Carlsbad, and that was our last zoning board meeting that you guys had. And that was approved at that 12 feet to really match that 2013 variation. So to keep that 12-foot fence line carrying across and not approve it at 10 feet, which would have really created like a 2-foot jog in the fence. So they just were really trying to keep a uniform look between the 2 lots. So they proposed the same color, the same style, the same material, and then the same location, obviously, there. From a zoning perspective, this is an R4 zoning district, which has a 25-foot front yard setback. All the surrounding properties are also single-family homes zoned R4, so to the north, to the south, to the east, and then to the west across Ridgeland is another subdivision zoned R4. My kind of my overview of corner fences every time. I usually do a little spiel on these, and that's just the code allows the 10, basically allows administratively we can approve 10 feet into that required side yard setback, but again, 5-foot high maximum, 50% open space fence, so allows some visibility, light and air through it, makes it a little less domineering, and then obviously can't obstruct any sight lines or cause any safety concerns from roadways or driveways or from sidewalks, to be able to approve that administratively. So variations come when somebody either doesn't, and then I guess also the privacy fence, similar to what the petitioner is asking, can be set, basically has to be set back at that 25-foot front yard setback line. It's 25 feet in the R4. It's different in other zoning districts, but that's where a privacy fence would essentially have to be set back as to that house setback line. So if they don't want to meet one of those 2 situations, they're basically the only alternative is asking for a variance. And again, we ask, they have to, through the standards set by the state, they have to find some kind of a hardship related to the property that makes it unique, different from other properties in the area and in the village. And again, those code requirements apply equally to across all corner lots. So being a corner lot itself is not unique because that code requirement is designed for them. There's also the matter of personal kind of conveniences or situations, kids, dogs, visibility preferences that can change depending on who's there, change over time. Landscaping is another one that's difficult because generally not considered part of the lot or the land, but sometimes there is some considerations there in terms of cost, especially with trees, which are, you know, if you get an old tree, it can be pretty substantial part of the yard, part of the look as well. But typically landscaping in general is not considered a hardship. And again, the main thing we try and have you guys think about when you're looking at these variances is precedence. So how does this hardship, how is it unique? And because if it's not, basically you're saying any other property that has these same situations, we would also approve this variation. So it's, how is this unique? How does it, why does this make sense on this lot and not necessarily others? And then, again, the corner lot fence background, you know, there's a lot to think about there. Conditions change over time, so while there might not be driveways around it now, think maybe the neighbor could put a detached garage and run a driveway there. And every lot's obviously can be a little bit different. They have different layouts. Corner fences are really about, the regulations are tough. You'd think, you know, this is a common problem across municipalities, so you'd think we'd come up with kind of a one-all solution to this, but it's very difficult to regulate these because they are such an aesthetic part of a community. You know, you drive in a neighborhood and fences are a very visible part of the neighborhood, so they can also cause visibility concerns, so that's another consideration there. So this variation request, they've asked for a 6-foot-high privacy fence, wood privacy fence, that to be located 12 feet into the required secondary yard. So again, 13 feet from the property line, and that'd be 14 feet from the sidewalk. So they've asked for 12 feet, similar to the neighbor to the south. They've also stated that basically the privacy fence where it's allowed by right is basically at that house setback line. So they have a elevated deck that's there with posts that come down right at that setback line, so they wouldn't be able to run fence posts there. They could in some ways potentially attach them to those posts, but that creates its own set of issues with the deck as well. So that's one of the reasons why they can't straight up meet the code at the setback line of the house, but they're also asking for the additional feet, again, for the, to allow kind of a larger encroachment, a larger backyard, and then more privacy as well compared to the open style 5-foot fence that's permitted, so. As we kind of get into this, if you guys look at it and you do seem to think it's an acceptable location and the visual impacts are okay, staff is kind of recommending we stick to our kind of 10-foot or 10-foot limit that has historically kind of been held for these, and that's because we don't want to start inching along and it kind of erodes the code slowly. The lines for almost any fence has been drawn pretty handedly at that 10-foot unless there's really truly a unique situation. This lot also kind of doesn't have those arguments the other two lots had with existing decks or matching a neighbor's existing fence line. So also something to consider on this lot is whatever is kind of approved here, expect similar to the variation request from last week at 6342 Carlsbad, the person at 643 Honey Lane, which is just north of this subject lot, at some point in the future is likely to make this same request. So understand this lot isn't necessarily unique in respect to its neighbor either. They're going to want, again, that kind of similar fence line from an aesthetic standpoint. So we're recommending, again, that 10 feet standard kind of be held here where there's not really anything unique that would prohibit them from putting that fence there. On the screen again is the subject site looking from Ridgeland Avenue at it. So you can see the elevated deck there, and then the posts come down just to the left of the tree that's there, and there's a patio below it. So the fence would be somewhere between that tree that's there and the house. Exactly where is dependent upon what you guys consider for this variance. They could do as little as 2 feet, and that would get them away from the posts, and 10 feet kind of being the maximum staff would recommend. And then they're asking for 12, which would come out a little further. And here's that angle kind of from the neighbor's secondary front yard that's north of them, looking at that patio area. So on the screen is the plat. You can kind of see there, the purple line is where by right they could have that privacy fence, but that does run into the deck posts there. But again, they could go kind of 2 feet from there. They would be away from the fence post and be able to place it there. Where the blue line is where a 5-foot open style fence is permitted. That's a 10-foot encroachment, and that is where staff would kind of recommend the maximum allowance for any privacy fence, or really any fence to be allowed at. And then the orange line is where the petitioners proposed the 12-foot setback there for their 6-foot privacy fence. So we have a couple open items for you guys to discuss again. Discuss that overall 12-foot encroachment request compared to maintaining the 10-foot for variations. For fence variations, that's recommended by staff to kind of keep that line where it's at. And then additionally, we have the open item of the petitioner is proposing a wood fence. Traditionally on these corner lots, the zoning board has preferred to see PVC fencing for these, as they typically take less kind of maintenance than a wood fence would, but and over time tend to look a little better. Wood fences can look very good, but they typically take more regular maintenance every year or two to have them maintain that, where PVC fences typically look the way they look. They might have a little weathering, but can generally just be washed with like a hose or something and look a little better. So typically with corner lots where somebody's asking for a variance, the zoning boards prefer to see PVC, not wood. Both are permitted materials though, so we've left that open for discussion for you guys though. And I believe that's it for the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, who has, or do either of you have any questions or comments about Dan's report?
Commissioner.
I'm good.
I have a few questions, and I did go by both properties on the agenda tonight. This particular property, I noted there was no visual impairment, so that's not a consideration. The questions I had is, there's full-grown trees on there. Will this fence upset the rooting of those trees or come near the trees at all?
I assume they'd be somewhere in the root zone of the trees, but typically putting a post in there will not kill a tree. You usually have to disrupt more of the root zone. So there might be a post or something placed in that root zone, regardless of if it was 2 feet, 10 feet, or 12 feet. But usually that's not, you wouldn't see that kill a tree unless there was something else wrong with the tree. So.
And I have two items for the petitioner. Why has the petitioner asked for wood as opposed to vinyl or PVC or something other material?
Okay,
When it comes to the material, the PVC fencing actually costs quite a bit more than wood fencing, and would match the fence that was put up in my neighbor's yard directly to the east of my house. So it would be uniform.
Okay. And the second question is, staff is recommending 10-foot, which is the general variation we've granted. Why are you asking for 12-foot?
12 foot, if you pull the picture up, it will go right past where my landscaping is. I have flagging rock on the outside of my landscaping. If I go 10 foot, I have to pull up all my bushes and flowers and everything that I have coming off the back of the house right there, right next to the posts. I was just going to try to make it as easy as possible. If I had to go 10 foot, I could deal with 10 foot, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
okay. I have a question. What's staff's feeling on semi-open as opposed to full security or full privacy?
I think it's tough because it comes down in this situation to really more aesthetics than from a visibility standpoint. If they kept it at 10 feet, I don't think we have any concerns about visibility from driveways or roadways or anything. So it really comes down to aesthetics and visual appearance. I think the preference has always been for an open style fence and maybe even doing some landscaping to maybe provide some more privacy, but traditionally the Plan Commission, the zoning board, and staff have really, which is why the code is the way it is and recommends the 50% open style. So I
Okay.
think visually, the general consensus has been open style is the better choice for that appearance-wise. Kind of keeps it a little more open, especially on the end. Corner lots are very visible again, so it kind of makes it a little less domineering.
Understood. Okay. Mr. Carr, do you wish to address the group here?
I think Donnie had
Yes, I would. I don't understand about the open style fencing comment.
Okay, can you give me 1
If I
second,
was using
please?
PVC, it would be completely closed off. I'm looking at using a 6-foot solid fence for privacy. I do have dogs and I do have kids, so I just don't want people to be able to see into my yard since I have a corner lot. It's more of a privacy and a security issue. Like I said before, PVC fence costs quite a bit more, and there's no other way for me to really get a fence up with the posts for my pre-existing deck and that tree that's in the way, unless I bump out that 10-foot.
Okay, sir,
I don't know.
if I can interrupt for a moment, we need to
Yes, sir.
swear you in before you speak, so if you wouldn't mind, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then please continue, and I apologize for the interruption.
Okay. Yes, no problem. Sorry about that.
All right, so is
Yeah,
that,
just offhand, I just don't understand about the aesthetics. If I was to go off of the back of my house, I could use a solid wood privacy fence. But now that I'm bumping out for the variance, I mean it's a couple feet, and then the parkway that I have is 22 foot off Ridgeland, and anywhere else in the subdivision, it's an 8-foot offset for the parkways. So I think that should be taken into account for visual safety for being set back that far. That's all I
Okay.
really got. That's all I got.
no, that's okay, that's fine. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Carr?
Commissioner Patrick, I have one.
Okay, let's start with Commissioner Bettenhausen.
Commissioner Patrick here. I think since the house rests on Ridgeland Avenue, which is a very well-traveled route, I see no problem with a privacy fence.
Okay, Commissioner
Commissioner
Bettenhausen,
Bettenhausen here.
go ahead.
I can support a privacy fence, provided if we're relying on the precedents that we have from across the street at a 12-foot and 12-foot, 6-foot high privacy fence, the material was PVC. I'm big on consistency along Ridgeland Avenue there. And another comment, too, I'm not a big fan of privacy fences because from a police perspective and a patrolling perspective, if we're looking for somebody, you can't see somebody behind a privacy fence.
Okay,
That's just my comment.
okay, well, thank you for that. Is there any other discussion from any, you want to do findings of facts now?
I'll do that more when, if you guys decide, I guess, what you're going to recommend to the village board, because those findings will obviously change a little bit depending on what you
Okay.
guys decide. If you decide to go with the petitioner's request, which is a wood 12-foot out privacy fence, or if you guys are looking to change it. I don't want to, generally what I've heard is it seems like the 10-foot is preferred, which was staff's recommendation. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's generally what I'm hearing. And then Commissioner Bentonhausen was fairly clear he wanted to see PVC there. and not the wood, and whether it's open design or closed is still up for discussion too. So you guys will kind of have to decide a little bit on which one you're going to proceed. And you can also talk with the petitioner and see what he's willing and open to do, because at the end of the day, if you guys recommend something that he's unwilling to do, not much is accomplished there. It might be better to just vote on his proposal then, so.
Okay,
But I did forget to mention, sorry, that part of his argument for the privacy fence was obviously Ridgeland, same with the neighbor, and just, that's not a super busy part of Ridgeland, but it is kind of a collector for a few different neighborhoods, so. And then there's also the fencing that runs along the west side of it, which is all backyards there, but there is a significant amount of fencing on that section of Ridgeland, so. It's not the same at all parts of Ridgeland, but for that area, there's quite a few fences along that stretch. So.
Okay. All right, well, if there's no other further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Commissioner Bettenhausen, so moved.
Commissioner Poshak, second.
Okay. Is there any opposition to closing the public hearing? Okay, then we'll consider the public hearing closed, and we'll move on now.
I'll just note there was no public comments on that, and there's nobody in the audience either, so.
Right. Okay, so now is there any other discussion to be had between commissioners, staff, the petitioner, Mr. Carr? Anybody got anything else to say before we actually entertain a motion? Okay.
No.
Seeing that there's none, Chair would entertain a motion from one of the commissioners.
I'd recommend at least you guys maybe discuss a little bit and try and decide. We've written the recommended motion kind of per our recommendation at the 10-foot variance, but if you guys have preferences on the material or the type, open or closed, you should make that part of the motion as well, so.
Well, okay, and that's well thought out, and I will say this much.
But anybody can make a motion.
Yes.
For what they prefer.
I personally understand the expense, the increased expense involved with PVC fence, because I'm facing some of that myself right now. So I know that the wood is actually cheaper. However, on the other side of the coin, I know that you can get wood fencing at the 6-foot level that is not 100% private, as one of the guys said, that the police can be searching through and that, and yet it's, it's like semi, which is 50% or maybe a little better than that, private. So there's good and bad on both sides. Obviously with the PVC, the expense is bad. So, but that's all I've got. Anybody else? Anybody want to talk about this a little bit? Mr. Carr, don't be afraid to jump in here too. You're in this.
Yeah, the only thing about having a 50% open fence, I understand what you're saying about, if the police are looking for somebody, but if I didn't need this variance and I went off the back of my house, I could have a 6-foot solid fence, correct?
Correct, but you can have a privacy fence if it was set back to the house line.
If I did not have objects that were in the way, that's the only thing I just wanted to bring up. That's all I got.
Okay. Commissioners, anything to add? Okay, hearing nothing, who would like to make a motion regarding this matter?
Commissioner Bettenhausen will move to recommend that the village board grant a 12-foot variation to the petitioner Michael Carr from section 3.j fence regulations of the zoning ordinance to permit a 6-foot-high privacy fence to extend 12 feet into the required secondary front yard where a fence encroachment is not permitted at 6342 Arcadia, Tinley Park in the R4 single-family residential zoning district, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein, and adopt recommended findings of fact as proposed by village staff as listed in August 13, 2020 staff report.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Poshak, second.
Okay. Now, Commissioner Bentenhausen, I had a hard time hearing at the first. Did you say a 10-foot variation or a 12-foot variation?
I made the motion as presented as a 12-foot because that's what he's requesting. However, I would state that I would not support that motion because I think a 10-foot would be adequate, and if it's 12-foot, I want to see PVC.
So how about if we put in the following conditions, that it is in fact a 10-foot rather than a 12-foot?
He can amend, he could amend his motion
Yes.
to say he wants it to be 10-foot and PVC, and that could be, he can amend that motion. And then Commissioner Paschak can choose to second it or not second it,
Okay.
that amendment.
I will amend the motion to reflect a 10-foot PVC variation at 10 foot.
I will
Or a
second
10-foot.
that.
But he's allowed to do a 6-foot open, well, a 10-foot, yes.
Yeah, so it's a 6-foot privacy fence, 10 feet into the encroachment, that's PVC. And now what is the motion on the,
And that would, that I could support, yes.
Okay.
So I will amend the motion to provide for the 10-foot encroachment, PVC material into the front yard, or side yard there, secondary fronting.
sure. I think we got that, and it was
Commissioner Poshak will second.
made and seconded there, so Chairman, if you can either take the vote, or if you want, before you take the vote, if you want to ask the petitioner if they're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I
That's
would
up to
like
you.
to hear from Mr. Carr on this.
Yeah, PVC is kind of off the table. The contractor I have a deposit with, I wanted to go with wood 100%. I know I'm at the mercy of you guys. Is there any way, with this variation, maybe going eight foot off, if there any any way I can deal with you guys just to zigzag around the objects in my yard just so I can have wood fence put up to get away from the PVC?
How would you feel about a quarter view wood fence? In other words, 75% privacy, 25% viewable. And that just means it's like slats or pickets.
I'm not familiar with that. I don't know what the aesthetics of that would even look like.
Essentially, that would be like if it was a 3-inch wide board, you'd have, I guess, or a 4-inch board would have a 1-inch space, 4-inch board, 1-inch space. It would be.
Or the boards can be opposite sides. If you, the only thing, and I know I'm getting senile, but the only thing that comes to mind is if you were at the Delta Sonic, the car wash there, their fence is what they call three-quarter private. And what it's got alternating wide boards, not like little pickets, but wide boards on either side of the fence frame. And it actually is pretty attractive.
I think that like a shadow box style.
Yes, almost
those
like
would,
exactly.
Those are considered privacy, but I guess you could, if you were okay with a shadow box over, I guess, a flat fence with all the boards on one side, you could, I guess, make that a preference in the motion. But that wouldn't be semi-transparent. That is still considered privacy.
Yes,
So,
but it is semi-transparent.
yeah.
Any discussion?
I'd be open to it. Would that be at the 10-foot variance then, or would that be?
In my mind, it would be at the 10-foot variance. We need to hear from the two commissioners also.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pochak, I could agree to the 10-foot variance.
With the three, with
Commissioner
the,
Badenhausen, I can agree to a 10-foot board over boards, that I think what that called the shadow box look. I could agree to that.
okay, can I have an
I
amendment
would
to?
make the Commissioner Badenhausen moves to amend it to a 10-foot variance, board over board, shadow box look, fence wood would be permissible in my motion.
Okay, can we amend the motion?
Pochak, second.
Okay, do we consider that amended motion and seconded now?
Yep, that was
Okay.
amended to what he explained and seconded, so that seems like what the three of you have
Okay.
agreed upon, and I don't know if you want to hear from the petitioner.
Madam Secretary, can we call the roll? Or take the vote? You know.
Hashtag,
Yes.
Bettenhausen,
Yes.
Chairman Suffusy.
Yes. Okay, now, Mr. Carr, your motion has carried unanimously, and what that means now is that the next step is for it to be presented to the village board, and that meeting will be, we're getting it from Dan, I'm not dragging out here.
September 1st.
It'll be the September 1st village board meeting, and all you have to do is, if you wish to go, you can go. They'll be reading your motion and acting on it because we had a unanimous vote here. So September 1st, you should be able to hear about the final answer about whether your fence is a go or not.
And I can follow up with you. That meeting will be on YouTube as well. We won't have you call into it because there's rarely questions, but we'll have a phone number for you in case the village board does have some follow-up questions. We'll essentially call you, but it'll be on the same YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you guys very much for your time.
All right, well, thank you for your time and your patience, and you have a great evening. You're welcome to stay on and listen to the rest of this. It's not very exciting, but you're welcome to do it. All right. Are we ready for the next hearing? Okay, if everyone's ready, we're going to do the next public hearing. This is item number 2, and this is a public hearing requested by Daniel and Deborah Shanahan at 16701 Odell Avenue, and we're looking for a shed setback variation. The petitioners, Daniel and Deborah Shanahan, are requesting a variation from section 3.1 of the zoning code accessory structure regulations at the property located at 16701 South Odell Avenue in the R4 Single Family Residential Zoning District. This variation would permit the petitioners to reconstruct an existing 64 square foot shed that is located approximately 1 foot from the rear yard lot line and 4 feet from the side yard lot line instead of the required minimum setback of 5 feet. So, may I have a motion to open the hearing?
So moved, Commissioner Badenhausen.
Okay, and a second?
Pochak, second.
Okay. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, we can go ahead and proceed. Are you ready, Dan?
Yep. Yeah, so this is at 16701 Odell. This is basically a shed replacement. There's an existing shed on this site that they're looking to replace in the same location. It doesn't quite meet our setbacks for a shed, so they're here to request a variance from you. The background of the site is it's the southeast corner of 167th Street and Odell Avenue. The house primarily fronts, the front of the house fronts 167th Street with the secondary front yard really kind of being more off Odell. It's a 7,739 square foot corner lot in the Tinley Heights subdivision. It's a little bit older subdivision, built in the 1960s. These corner lots, unlike the last subdivision you guys saw, do not have extra lot width on them or extra size. So these corner lots in the subdivision essentially are the same size as the interior lots throughout the subdivision, and don't kind of have that extra space. So it basically results in them having a little bit less backyard space than kind of the neighboring interior lots there. It makes it a little bit tighter in the back. The lot does have an existing above-ground pool, a patio, walkways, and then there's a solid fence, privacy fence that's surrounding the backyard. So they have, it's a fairly tight lot, not a huge backyard, but there is quite a bit back there. There's also the shed that's before you guys here today. It's been at the existing location since 1969. We actually found the permit from then. It's legal non-conforming for that reason, so the shed's been at that location, was permitted at some point. We're gonna assume it met codes, zoning codes, the obviously 1969 zoning codes being different than what's here before, what's here today. It is kind of unknown what maintenance work has happened over the time. I know the petitioner has stated as part of the request they have replaced a lot of the boards on the outside over the time that they've lived there. Before they lived there, we don't really know what kind of maintenance they did because we don't really require permits for maintenance. But it seems like the general shed has been there, probably with a significant replacement of the exterior, because 1969 is a long time for a shed to last. So there is a concrete slab there with the shed, and again, now the shed is at a point where it's deteriorating again, the roof and the exterior, and they're looking to replace it. So here's the existing shed. You can see on the left, it's kind of starting to deteriorate, rot away kind of from the bottom, which happens with wood sheds after some time. And then on the right is a picture kind of showing you what those setbacks look like. So we don't have the exact setbacks of those because the plat is fairly old. Also, it appears with that plat and where the fences are that the fences are at least set in from the property line at least 6 inches or a foot. So it's a little hard to gauge exactly what that setback is without having a new survey drawn with that shed on it. So we've built in some elasticity to our motions that you guys will see today because we don't know that exact setback. But it is about 10 inches from the fence that's there, so the fence isn't necessarily the property line. But that does give you a view that it's basically almost impossible to get back there by yourself, to actually just squeeze between the fence. You'd have to have either a door out the back or get on a ladder or something along those lines to get behind it. So it is a little tough maintenance-wise on those two corners to get behind it. Zoning-wise, this is R4 single-family residential lot. To the south and west are also the R4 single-family homes in the same subdivision. Or east, south, and west, I should say. To the north are townhomes in the Crystal Cove subdivision. I already went over kind of what to look for in a variance. So one thing that I didn't bring up with that one is you can always try to reduce or lessen a request, which you guys are aware of. Is if somebody's making a request, you can kind of think, is there any way that this can get closer to the code if they do have some kind of hardship or situation there? Is what's the least amount that, or closest to the code that we can get with it? The variation request again is a 64 square foot wood shed. That's what exists there now. That's what they're looking to replace it with. Same height, same size as the existing one. It very close in style, so obviously not the exact same because of the age of the shed, but kind of a similar barn style shed that's there now. They prefer to use the existing concrete pad instead of digging that up or cutting it away or pouring it elsewhere. They're trying to use that current concrete pad that's there. There's fairly limited alternative options on the site, which I'll show you the site overview here in a second. with the existing structures that are on that site, there's essentially just one small patch of grass or yard that's kind of left in the center of the lot, and that's not preferable to them to put a shed in that area. Again, it ranges from about 1 to 4 feet from the property line. The motions we've made kind of before you are to allow it up to 1 foot, and that builds with the understanding that they're essentially putting it back in the same place. So that just builds in a buffer to make sure that it is allowed where it's at now. So. And again, so the fence is set in from that lot line, kind of reducing that space of that setback even further than that 1 to 4 feet. So we have that open for discussion, just the variance in general. The image on your screen now is the shed that's being proposed, kind of a barn style, 64 square feet, so not exactly a large one. Here's kind of an overview of that lot, so you can see where they have a pool, generally, a patio, as well as a walkway that runs through the property next to the house. So there's kind of a space between the patio and the pool, but that's essentially the one area that they still have a little bit of yard space. The area so there's essentially that triangle that's behind the shed. That becomes an issue. So with setbacks, we typically want that 5 feet there to one, make sure that it doesn't interfere with anything a neighbor might do or want to do on their property. Give them space to put in fencing or another structure. On their property, it also gives, the 5 feet kind of gives that space to be able to maintain your own structures and not have to go onto somebody else's property, and make sure it's maintained there. So that's really the one that comes into play here, because everything's kind of built around here. It's a fairly established subdivision. It really comes down to that maintenance, I think, more than anything. The petitioner has lived in this site for quite a long time, so they can kind of speak to that. We've never had any property maintenance issues or complaints on this property that I saw, so they have been able to maintain that. They've said that they basically have a weed and grass barrier down, as well as basically some stone, and then annually at least they were treating it with weed and grass killer, so that way basically nothing's growing back there. You're not getting tall weeds or anything that goes over into the neighbor's yard. So they've been able to maintain it. It's obviously not a preferred situation to have something you can't easily get behind and maintain, but they've been able to find ways to make sure it doesn't become a nuisance. So again, just looking to replace that right where it's at there. So sorry, I think those are from the last one. So it's just the one open item, the request for the variance, and that's it for the staff report. Send it back to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, before we go on to Mr. and Mrs. Shanahan, do either of you commissioners have any questions for Dan Ritter?
Commissioner Postek, I have one question. It seems like it's a very busy corner of the property. Not only is the shed there, but it almost abuts 2 garages. So my question is, since it's an existing shed, that's not a problem, but it's going to be replaced by a wood shed. Can any other material be used instead of wood? I'm concerned about the fire capabilities, because it's so close to both garages.
Sure, I guess you could, yes, the answer is yes, they could do like a PVC shed or a metal shed, but you can ask the petitioner, I guess, if that's what you're preferring, you can ask them if they're open to that. I know their preference was, I think, to kind of keep something close to what's there, and I don't know cost differences either, but yes, they could do something else there. It's not required by our building codes, but you can ask them, I guess, what their if they'd be open to some other material.
Dan, will findings of fact include any discussion from the fire department on that?
They typically wouldn't review a shed building permit anyways, as long as it meets our building permits. So we didn't run it past them, but if it met our building codes, that's what they like for them to do. So,
Okay.
if it was closer to so if it's within a certain distance of the primary principal structures, there is certain building codes and fire stopping requirements that kick in. But I do not believe there's a separation requirement between accessory structures, whether that's on the same lot or a different lot.
Understood.
I can check with, when they come in with the permit to make sure that's the case, but I don't believe there's any additional kind of, you don't
Did
need to
we lose some?
drywall it or fire stop it. So.
Commissioner Bentonhausen, did you have anything?
No, I think the replacement is fine. I understand the replacement. What's the height of the shed, do we know?
Very good question.
I have to clarify that with them, or
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
He's looking.
I don't have that in front of me, but give me 1 second.
Okay. I am looking at the accessory structure paragraph of the zoning code, and as long as it's not less than 10 feet from a principal building, we're okay. So,
I believe it's 12 foot, 6 inches to the peak of the roof.
that's
about-
perfect, because 18 says the code, so we're good there.
Yeah, and so the principal structure setback from the zoning code and from the building code perspective meet the code. But
Yeah, we're
it
okay on
does,
most cases, other than the side yard and rear yard.
yeah, it's when you get closer than 10 feet to the principal structure where you have people sleeping and living in, that it becomes a little bit more of a concern.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay, Mr. and
The
Mrs.
fact
Shanahan,
that-
are you on with us?
The fact that both the house and the house to the east our garages are right next to each other, running along the property line, so to speak, and they're, 5 foot back or so, I can't tell from, are there any easements that this will be in an easement?
No, not that we could tell on their plat, and not that we see on the plat of subdivision. So it doesn't look like there's an easement
Okay.
here that it's going into. If there is, or we find that out, they would have to get proper sign-offs from all the utility companies and basically our village engineer at that point as well, too. So,
Yep. Like I say, these houses both face 167, so they've got a little bit different situation in the lot sizes and everything, and this is strictly a replacement, and it's just going to make it look better, so I don't have a real problem with it.
Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Shanahan, are you on the air with us?
Yes, we are.
Okay, before you speak, I would like y'all to, just be sworn in if you would. So, very quickly, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Please continue.
Do you have a question for me?
Well, we thought maybe you had something that you wanted to say before we took questions.
it's a-
Thank you. I do have something to say. We've lived in this home for 34 years, and we've done the best we can to maintain that shed. It's been replaced and rebuilt, not replaced, but rebuilt piece by piece by piece, and it's, we did everything we could not to have to come to this point where replacing it, but the time has come. And we're really hoping that the village understands that. We've been, I've been a lifelong village, resident, and we're doing the best we can to keep our village safe and keep our neighborhood safe. Our neighbors aren't bothered by it. It's not causing any issues. No one's had any issues for 34 years, actually for 50 years, because they're 50 years. We're just requesting the replacement. And we are looking to use a material that's a little bit stronger than wood, but not but not like vinyl or metal. We're looking to use the tough shed material, which is coated with a protective coating, which protects the wood for a lot longer than a traditional wood shed. So we really did look at options before we came to this decision.
Understood.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mrs. Shanahan?
Commissioner Poshak, none.
Whoops, Commissioner Bettenhausen, none.
Okay, well, very good. Then do you want to do findings of fact now, or should we just go to the motion?
I can just give you, the summary is essentially of the findings of fact, kind of those top three that you
Okay.
need to meet to
Yes.
meet the state statute, is that, that while the property can yield a reasonable return, the shed's been existing and has been permitted on the property at this location, essentially is a replacement of the existing shed, bringing it, making it more attractive than it currently is, and that alternative options were explored but limit the overall usefulness and attractiveness of the property. And the property being unique in that it's older, in a kind of more densely constructed subdivision, and limiting the lot size and alternative locations there. And not altering the essential character of the neighborhood. The shed's been there for 50 years, so it's really not changing from what's there currently. So that's it for the kind of summary, the standards.
Okay, does anyone have any more discussion items before we close the hearing and move to our motion section? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Commissioner Poshak, motion.
Commissioner Bettenhausen, second.
Okay, is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask commissioners if anyone wishes to make a motion regarding this variance request.
Commissioner Bettenhausen, I move to recommend that the village board grant a variation from section Roman numeral 3, subparagraph I of the zoning code, accessory structural regulations at the property located at 16701 Odell in the R4 single-family residential zoning district. This variation would permit the petitioner to reconstruct an existing 64 square foot shed that is located approximately 1 foot from the rear yard lot line and 4 feet from the side yard lot line, instead of the required minimum setback of 5 feet, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein, and adopt recommended findings of facts as proposed by the village staff as listed in the August 13, 2020 staff report. And I would like to add, so that the petitioner can maintain and use the current concrete base of the shed.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Poshak, second.
All right. Any final discussion before we call the vote? Hearing none. Barb, can you?
Haschak,
Yes.
Bettenhausen,
Yes.
Chairman Subbasi.
Yes. Okay. Mrs. Shanahan, your request has been approved by this board unanimously. Now, your next step will be the village board, who will read and approve your permit or approve your variance on September 1st. Is this one also on the 1st?
Correct, same situation.
So,
September
same
1st.
situation as before, September 1st, the village board meeting. You are not required to be there. You are not required to be called in, but a number will be provided to you so that if, while you're watching the proceedings on the YouTube channel, if you choose to, and you have questions or comments, you'll be able to call in to submit them. Do you understand all that?
Generally, we'll be calling
Yeah.
them if there's
Oh.
questions. So
Oh, actually, if they have questions, they're gonna call you.
Yeah, and unless they have questions, we usually won't, the presentation's here, so, but if, we'll have your numbers, and you can watch it live on YouTube, if they have questions, we'll call you guys, but otherwise it should be fairly quick.
Thank you. Understood. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
All right.
I'll follow up with you tomorrow or on Monday.
Well, we thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right, so now we are up to good of the order.
I gave you guys a fairly detailed development update at the last meeting a couple weeks ago, so.
Yes, you did.
Nothing's changed since then, so, nothing for the good of the order. Thanks everyone for attending again.
Yeah,
We're down to 4 of you guys, so we appreciate you guys attending. You know, but one of you guys can take off, but we gotta calculate it so that way, we can still have meetings, so I appreciate everyone
I have
being on time and being here. So,
I have one comment before we go to close. We had a storm, unlike a lot of other storms on Monday, and I need to just compliment or send a real shout out to the Public Works. They were Johnny on the spot. They came by as soon as it was over, made sure the street was clear, and then came by the very next day and removed all of the branches and stuff that was causing a hazard. And it was very quickly, so it was deeply appreciated.
yep, and I think they already have the street sweeper going, so.
Yeah, the street sweeper's back.
Yeah,
It's back.
they're going pretty quick out there, so.
Does
I
anyone
concur
else
with
have
that.
anything before we close the meeting?
Comments from the public?
Yeah, no comments from the public were received, and there's nobody in attendance.
Right. Okay, well then, Chair will entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Commissioner Poshcheck motion.
Commissioner Bettenhausen seconds that motion.
Okay. Is there any opposition to closing the meeting? I didn't think so. Okay, then this regular meeting is closed. Thank you very much for all your time, everybody.